Our next guest is Laurel Williamson, who is Communications Manager with DVIS. What is DVIS for the folks that don't know?
We are a full-service agency. DVIS actually stands for Domestic Violence Intervention Services, and we serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, and stalking. And we serve primarily the greater Tulsa area, but we also serve Creek County as well.
Well, there are going to be folks out there that say, we don't have a lot of that here. We do, don't we?
I beg to disagree, yes. I can tell you Oklahoma State is number 2 in the nation, actually, for domestic violence incidents
No
overall,
kidding.
and for women murdered by their intimate partner. 2nd in the nation. And Tulsa County, if I have to go ahead and tell on us, we rank the highest in the state for domestic violence incidences and homicides.
Those are pretty scary figures.
Yeah,
Is there any one thing that we can point to and say that's the cause?
Not really. There's a lot of overlap and intersectionality. You take into consideration things like poverty, and then in situations of violence, a lot of times things like mental health can make it worse, or substance abuse can make it worse. But overall, we saw a sharp incline during COVID. And then when we returned back to our new normal or whatever, the numbers never went down. If anything, they kept going up.
That tells me that you guys are on call 24/7.
We are. We have a crisis line 24/7. We have hospital advocates who are ready to be dispatched day or night, any time of day. We have an emergency shelter for individuals who are fleeing a violent situation and need somewhere to go. We have children's programs, we have outpatient counseling, we have a legal department. So if someone needs an emergency protective order, or they need assistance with court hearings, divorce proceedings, custody issues, things like that, they can receive services from us for free that way. We have transitional living for folks who are ready to phase out of the shelter but aren't quite self-sufficient, and they pay a little amount of rent to us, and then we put that in a savings account, and then when they are ready to have a home of their own, they have money for deposits and things like that. So we try to meet needs across the board at every stage of if they're ready to leave, they need a safety plan, they're not sure if they're ready to leave, or if they have left and need somewhere to go, and then heal from there.
I would assume, and this, I don't know if once I speak, but I would assume that you guys also have a lot of statistical information that you've compiled over the years.
We do. We are constantly measuring and compiling data, both from services provided and as well as the impact in the community overall. One of the things that we try to do for prevention side of things is education and outreach. And so we measure how many classrooms we got into, how many courses we were able to give or trainings we were able to give on healthy relationships, and we want to start that at an early age to break the cycle of violence before it starts.
You know, it's such a sad thing, but I'm told you have to choose to be angry. It's not our nature to have anger as something we can just pull out of the bag and say, I think I'll be angry right now, you know, at you.
I think in theory, I would agree, but I think that also doesn't take into consideration environment of which
That's the reason I brought that up. I'd be interested in knowing, do you see an increase in domestic violence or sexual abuse following NFL football or basketball, major basketball games?
I mean, I've seen lots of correlative data, but nothing that can really be tied to this is causing it. What I can tell you is we also have an offenders program. And what I can tell you is that people who abuse were very, very often abused themselves.
Really?
And we can't fix that problem unless we help them too. And so we do our best.
You've got to have ironclad security because you have to go into the middle of the night sometimes
We
and
do.
pull people out of a situation that can be very dangerous for the folks like yourself.
Luckily, our domestic violence calls, we have law enforcement that we go with, and so if that officer does a lethality assessment on that person who's reached out for help, and encourages them to leave the situation now, then our advocate is there to help with the intake process and welcoming them to the shelter and begin their treatment.
Transformation.
I suppose. Yes,
Yeah.
Transformation. Much better word.
It's interesting to me to think about the fact, something you said earlier, those who abuse others are leaving a mark on that person that will cause them to become domestic abusers down the road.
Yes and no. It can go either way. What we see more likely, particularly in women who say they watched their mother be abused by their father, then they have the tendency to feel more comfortable with men who seek power and control, and so they find themselves often over and over again involved with different versions of their father, experiencing abuse themselves because it feels natural.
That's sick.
It's very sad, very, very sad.
You ever gone on any of these calls?
No, when I worked as a volunteer advocate, I mostly answered crisis calls. Back then it was DVIS/call rape. It was before we fully absorbed call rape. And so I would answer calls from folks who had been victimized sexually or on behalf of someone they knew who had been victimized sexually.
There's got to be things that break your heart.
Every day.
Easy to carry that work home, isn't it?
Personally, I'm lucky because I get to tell all the stories. I get to have my finger on the data so I can explain to people the scope of the problem and why we do what we do, but then I also get to lift up all the success stories. If someone completes our 52-week offenders program, they have a much lower chance of recidivism, of offending again. And those who go through our services as a survivor find a new level of empowerment and independence and self-sufficiency that they may not have ever found before. And so I get to present a balance of the data that this is why we do what we do, and it's terrible that we have to do it, but it also leads to good, and so we need to keep doing it.
Oh gosh, I don't envy what you do, but I respect and admire it.
Thank you.
And I think it comes from knowing. I've never seen domestic or sexual abuse in my family in either side of the tree, but I have heard tales of those who have it in their family, and I've seen the heartbreak it's caused.
At DVIS, we say often, everyone knows someone.
Yeah.
And I would say a large percentage of our employees have a personal connection to that issue. Either they witnessed it or experienced it themselves, or they know someone who did, and it calls us to that work.
Well, you do good work, kid.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by,
My
and we really
pleasure.
appreciate the time. And tell the folks back at the home office we said hey.
I will.
All right.
Thank
we'll
you.
talk again.
Okay.
We'll take a short break. We'll be back right after this.